What's up? Welcome back to a fresh new video. It's a fresh video. I've got a fresh cup. And what does coffee and my brand new Lightroom presets have in common? Well, bonus points to anybody who gets that answer by the end of this video. But yes, my Lightroom presets are finally available, and we're gonna get into those. I'm gonna show you how to make your photos pop with just one click. But what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna show you some tweaks and some tricks in Lightroom that you can do, because look, I've been there. I know what it feels like to buy presets, get excited, click, and then look at your photo and be like, that's not at all how I was expecting it to look, based off some of those before and after photos and based off whatever the creator said was gonna happen when I used the presets. I know what that feels like. I'm gonna show you how to work some things in Lightroom to make some quick fixes that's gonna make whatever presets you're using, mine, somebody else's, look 10 times better. All right, let's dive into the best part. Let's actually jump into Lightroom, put these presets up on the screen, kick the tires a little bit, look under the hood, and see how these things work. If you wanna follow along, you can pick these presets up. There's gonna be a link down below. But Lightroom. All right, first things first, once you get into Lightroom and you wanna install these presets, you're gonna click on this plus sign, go to import presets. You're gonna find the folder wherever you have it saved. Probably went from your downloads, maybe you drug it onto your desktop like I have. Here's the folder here. You're just gonna grab every single one of the presets that are within the folder, click on import, and that's gonna bring them in. Now, once they're imported, they are probably gonna land down here under user presets, and you can just right click those and click on add to favorites, and that's how you can categorize them and have them up top here. I have a total of 6 images preloaded that we are gonna run through. These are just all the raws. We're gonna run through all of these, and I'm gonna show you how these different presets could work in different scenarios. Every single one of these presets is titled after something from my hometown, Pacific Northwest of Seattle. Whether that's Deception, which is a famous bridge out there, Pacific for Pacific Northwest or Pacific Ocean, Pike from Pike Place Market, or the Pike Starbucks roast. Maybe that's a pretty big clue on my presets and coffee having something in common. And space is Space Needle. All right, for this first photo, we're gonna run with the Deception preset. Now, Deception, Fade, exact same tones. The only difference, I've got Fade highlighted here, and there's the regular. You can see that in the fade, we're just gonna be bringing those blacks up, bringing the whites down, and creating that nice vintage fade while still maintaining the same tones from the Deception overall preset. Now, to run a quick before and after with these presets, I think it's adding some really nice blue tones, desaturating a little bit, but it's not gonna look perfect the first time you apply a preset. It's always gonna have a little bit of work you can do. So the best tip that I can give you about presets is they are a starting point. It's gonna give you a certain stylized look, but you're still gonna have to do some work in Lightroom to get the look that you're going for. The creator might have had a different exposure in camera than you had, and then when you apply it, maybe your preset comes out looking like this, and you're immediately like, again, that's not what I was going for when I saw these presets being applied to their images. But typically, if you just adjust your exposure based upon after you apply the preset, what it's giving you, if it's too dark, then bring your exposure up. And if when you apply it, if it's too bright, then bring your exposure down. This image, I'm gonna actually bring this exposure pretty far down, and that's because I want this to have that stylized kind of silhouette look while still keeping those same tones. There's the before and after, keeping those same tones of that Deception preset. Next thing you want to do with my presets, besides adjusting your exposure, is if you scroll down to your lens correction panels, I leave these turned off because I don't want it to automatically assume that you were using a Zeiss Batis lens. Sometimes that can happen and it can mess your profiles up. So you want to come down here and you want to select Enable Profile Corrections, and I typically almost always turn on Remove Chromatic Aberrations. But once I turn on this Enable Profile Corrections, the one thing I don't like that it does is it fixes the natural vignette of the lens, which I like to have that vignette on, so I take that assist completely off by sliding it all the way down. And I would say that this image is pretty well done. We went from our raw photo in camera, we landed there. The only thing I might do to this image is I might just apply a small graduated filter to the bottom here. I'm going to pull that exposure down and get some more of those blacks in the shadows, as well as bring the highlights up and the whites up of those headlights a little bit to get those to kind of pop out of the dark. And overall, that graduated filter is just going to draw the eye up to the silhouette of the subject in this image. And if I wanted this to have more of that faded look, I would use Deception Fade. I would do the same process, bringing the exposure down in this instance because I want that silhouette piece. Would come down to turn on these lens corrections, bring the vignette down, meaning take the vignette correction away. And now we have something that's very similar to the last shot. The difference here, and you can see with the before and afters, we have a nice fade applied to the highlights and the shadows. But for me on this one, I actually like the way that the original Deception looks instead of the fade, because I think those nice punchy blacks is a really clean look. Next image, I'm going to show you another example of where Deception works really well, and we're actually going to use the faded version of this one. So we're already making some really good progress here, and it's actually exposed pretty well. I actually don't think I would change that exposure whatsoever. I would come down here though to those lens corrections. Let's put those on, take the vignette out. And this image is pretty well taken care of. I might make some small tweaks by adding some dehaze just to get some of those blacks to pop. Might take a clarity brush and just bring these rocks out a little bit. Bring the clarity on that up. Get some contrast in there so that those whites aren't too blown out. And then I would say that this image, before and after on that one, done. This next image, Manhattan from a helicopter, really cool shot. This was a really fun trip. We're gonna go with Pacific on this one. And if we wanted to run Pacific Fade, it's the same thing as Deception. It would just be a variation where we get that nice fade. So I've got Pacific applied. I'm gonna actually need to crop this one out a little bit. Let's go IG on it. So 4x5, I'm gonna line up the subject, which is that Chrysler building on the rule of thirds. So I've got that taken care of. My exposure here is pretty good too. I'm not going to be messing with that. Let's go ahead and turn those lens corrections on. And we're using a different lens here, so it's automatically going to know what lens that is. Let's get rid of that vignette. And this one's going to need a little bit of a, make sure that building is nice and straight. There we go. We're all set there. And this one's not quite doing it. It's still lacking some punch. I do like the tones that we're getting. It kind of Pacific really cools off, as opposed to if I had Deception on here, it's going to warm up the highlights. Pacific's going to be just a lot more of a cool feel. But this one's not quite doing it. So I'm going to bring the contrast back to 0. And let's go ahead and boost some clarity, which is not something I would do of a lot of images, but let's boost the clarity. We can get some of these buildings to pop a little bit. Dehaze is just going to add a really nice, unique contrast to the image, which I like that a lot. So we're already getting a little more punch out of this image, which I'm pretty happy with. Might just add a radial filter here. Let's highlight the building, tap O to see what we're working with. I'm going to invert it. I'm going to feather it out completely. Get rid of O. Let's keep that exposure up just a touch, and let's make sure we add some contrast so it's not too obvious what we're doing here. And the highlights look pretty good just to make that building pop out of the image a little bit further. And I would say that now we've got some more punch to this one, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. Our fourth image, let's go ahead and crop this portrait style shot out, and you can see how these presets could apply to people. So we'll go Instagram on that, tap X to change from landscape to vertical. We're gonna center this one right up. I really like how space looks on this one, but I'm gonna show you that in just a second. You can see how with a human subject, how these presets can really keep the skin tones really nice, but they all offer just a little bit of a different feel. And this one would have some exposure things. So as an example, she's coming in just a little bit hot on the highlights there. Might bring the exposure down just a little bit, bring the highlights down a little bit. I'd probably do a lot more tweaking on this one, but you can see that Deception offers a really cool feel here. But that's not the one that we want to be using. So let's go ahead and get rid of that preset, and I'm going to show you how cool space looks. And you can see as soon as we apply that space preset, we just get such a cool punchy black and white, very chromatic feel. You might need to go in here and do the regular tweaks we've been talking about. We're going to put these corrections back on, kill the vignette, might do an auto yeah, just you can see what that transform is doing on the auto piece there, just making it a little more flattering and straightening out the image a little bit. One more thing that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to mess with the exposure. It's just a little bit dark. You want to be careful here though, because when we bring the exposure up, her skin's going to get pretty blown out. But you can just change that by adjusting the brightness a little bit. And now what we're getting is something that I am really happy with. That very chromatic kind of high-end feel to the image. Like that one a lot. Our fifth image is going to be this Chemex and coffee, and that's not exactly what I meant by my presets and coffee having something in common. What I meant is that I have this one called Pike roast from Starbucks, original Starbucks from Seattle. And what better image to apply a preset named after coffee to a picture of coffee. So I apply this Pike preset. Exposure looks good here. I'm not going to be messing with that. I'm just going to go in, do the normal with the lens correction. And now this is what we're working with. I do want to see if this will transform a little bit better though, because it is a little bit off and transform's not doing much. So let's go ahead and get this cropped out for IG. And then I'm going to just straighten out my lines a little bit and make that a little bit more symmetrical. It's good. I'm going pretty quick here. I might go in and do a little bit more if I was actually going to be putting the time into this, but just to show you how these presets work today, it's not enough punch. The Pike preset, you can see those nice cool tones while warming up some of the oranges. I like this preset and what it does, but it's lacking some punch. When I'm lacking punch, the first thing that I'll typically go and do, I'll just move into dehaze so I can get some of that unique contrast. All of my presets pull the contrast down a little bit because there's so much contrast applied in the curves that I found that bringing the contrast down in most cases is going to be the best way to go. This one, I'm going to put that contrast back into the image, and then we can bring our shadows down a little bit because there's not much shadow detail in this entire shot. So shadows down a little bit to boost our highlights actually back up to get a little bit of nice punch and brightness off of that. And the last little tweak I would make here is I'll bring my vibrance up a little bit just to get the tones of the brown and orange of the coffee to really kind of come through and be the subject of this shot. So let's see our before and after. And yeah, that's a really cool shot of my favorite way to make coffee through the Chemex. Last piece, the picture of fitness stuff. We got some fitness stuff going on here. We're going to be using the Pike preset here. This one turns out really good, but I would also argue that Deception has a really interesting look, kind of more of that teal and orange feel. The only thing I don't like about Deception here is we lose the whites of the shoes, which I want to keep. So we're going to go to Pike. Let's crop this out again for IG at 4:5. We're going to center it up. And we're a little bit off axis here, so a quick trick is if you just grab this measuring tool and you select the exact line that you want it to shape up to. You don't want to make a straight line because that's not going to do anything. You want to find a straight thing in the image and select that, and it's going to go ahead and just center up based off of your selection. So that's looking really good. A few tweaks that I would make here is I would actually bring the contrast back into this image after doing our lens correction trick. And the exposure is really good, but this image is like the other ones. Again, presets are always just being a starting point. It's good. I could take that. There's the before and after. We got some really nice tones in there, cooled it off. But we can do a little bit more here to make this thing pop. So what we're going to do here, we're going to just add a couple of filters. I'm going to bring a graduated filter down below, and we're just going to get the exposure out a little bit there and just draw some attention to the center of the frame, which is the subject in this case. Let's grab a radial filter, and we're going to go ahead and put this kind of around that light bar in the back. Double click effect to reset everything just in case it defaulted. Let's invert this, tap on O to see what we're working with. I'm going to feather it out like I do in most cases. Get rid of O, and then let's go ahead and bring some highlights in here, and that's going to give this kind of fog effect to that light bar back there, which is a nice look. Let's add a little bit of contrast back in. And what I found with adding contrast back in after doing something like increasing highlights or increasing exposure back to that New York shot, contrast makes it less noticeable in a good way. It needs to be noticeable because we're trying to do something, but you don't want it to be too noticeable. So where, as an example, let's go ahead and grab that radial filter again. If I had the contrast way down, I boosted my highlights way up. You can see it's pretty obvious that something was done to this image. But if I bring my highlights back to where I had them, and you can slowly see, start adding contrast, it reduces that effect a little bit and just makes it a little bit more of a sell that it's a subtle change, which is the goal in Lightroom. Before and after on this one, the Pike preset just does so much for this image. Punches the whites, brings the blues through. Made those small tweaks with the radial and graduated filters to offer just a little bit more to it. I'm extremely excited to be able to drop these presets. I've been working on them for years, fine-tuning and tweaking to make them just the way that I like. I'm excited for you to be able to use them as well. You can check them out at the link down below. I'm also going to be including a limited time 60% off launch sale on these, so you can see that promo code down below. Make sure you apply that to save a little bit of cash. One thing I wanted to make sure that I didn't do in my preset pack was include 15, 20, 30 different presets all in the same pack that all have an extremely different look and feel to them. I find that extremely confusing. So what I wanted to do was deliver 6 extremely high quality presets, ones that I use every single day, ones that have taken me years to develop, and more importantly, ones that do offer a little bit of a different feel to them, whether you're doing portraits, landscapes, studio stuff, fitness stuff, whatever you're doing. I'm confident these presets are going to be really strong, but I wanted them to be able to have a consistent feel regardless of which one that you're using. But that's going to do it for me. My name is Sean DeWispelaire, and this channel is all about the skills behind the art of creativity: photography, videography, editing, gear reviews, tutorials. And me being full-time in the fitness industry, it's always going to have just a bit of a fitness feel to it. So if that's something that you're into, hit the subscribe button down below so that you can be up to speed on all the future videos that I have planned. That's it. We're all set here. Have a great day. See ya.